My face was already on 3 gossip blogs before I even finished brushing my teeth. First message came in at 5:42 a.m. from James, one of my earliest employees. It just said, "What the hell is this?" Then came the screenshots, dozens. My phone screen filled with text from old customers, distant relatives, vendors I hadn't spoken to in years. "Is this true? Are you okay? How could you?" And one particularly blunt one from my nephew. "Uncle Mike, Mom says you're a dog." At first, I thought someone hacked her account. That maybe this was some messed up scam or phishing attempt. But no, there she was, on Facebook, clear as day. Her profile photo, smiling with a mimosa. Her caption, "He lied. He cheated. He'll learn what half feels like. Hashtag justice for me, hashtag divorce is freedom." And she tagged my business page. Not just any business, either. My life's work. The company I built from an oil-stained garage and a beat-up 1991 F-150 with no AC. She smeared that page with accusations, half-truths, and photos of a random woman sitting across from me at a Chili's. That proof? A blurry picture of a coworker I was mentoring. She'd cropped it so my wedding ring was clearly visible, but the dozen other people at the table were conveniently removed. Context? Deleted. And the worst part? It was working. By the time I walked into the main office, 3 clients had already canceled appointments until things settled down. One supplier emailed asking for clarification before renewing the quarter contract. And 2 franchise locations, franchises I don't even technically run anymore, forwarded me angry Yelp reviews calling us a company that supports cheaters. All before 9 a.m. At breakfast, she acted like nothing happened. She set the table, warmed up the coffee, flipped through her phone like she wasn't detonating my entire existence in real time. "You're unusually quiet," she said, setting a plate of eggs in front of me like it was still 2010. Then she slid a manila envelope across the table. "Just sign the initial response. We don't need to make this ugly. Mediation is scheduled in 2 weeks." I looked at her. Really looked at her. She had on makeup, lipstick, perfume she only wore to parties or funerals. The morning light from the kitchen window caught the corner of her mouth, and for a second, I thought I saw something new. Or maybe it had always been there, just buried under 17 years of daily habits. "Calculation. You sure about this?" I asked quietly. She smiled. "Dead sure. You won't fight it anyway. You never do." And that, right there, that smirk, that little lift in her voice like she'd already won, that's when the temperature in my brain dropped about 20 degrees. Because I had fought before. Not loud, not messy, but I didn't come from money. I came from dirt. My hands still carry the scars from every bolt I over-tightened, every hydraulic line that sprayed hot fluid, every winter I worked without gloves because I couldn't afford new ones. So no, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just took my coffee, grabbed the envelope, and walked outside. And if you've made it this far, and you're one of the 90% of folks who listen to these stories without subscribing, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it tells my team this kind of story matters. That men like me, and maybe like you, aren't invisible. Now back to her. Later that day, I got an email from her lawyer. Apparently, she was requesting emergency access to the company books, citing concern over possible asset transfers. Her language was perfect. Weaponized. Sterile. She'd been preparing this for a while. She must have thought she was cornering a wounded animal. But that night, I didn't sleep at home. I didn't tell her where I went. I drove instead to the only place I trusted more than any courtroom or bank account. A place that still smelled like oil and rubber and blood. The original garage. The first one. Behind the diner where I used to fix delivery trucks for tips and leftover pie. And there, behind the old breaker panel, inside a wall I sealed up with fresh drywall in 2014, I pulled out a tin box wrapped in a stained mechanic's rag. Inside, my answer to everything. Not just her lies. Not just the divorce. But her entire plan. And it started with one name, written in black ink on yellow legal paper, folded 3 times and taped to the back of an envelope labeled, "Open only if work comes home." The lights still buzzed the same way they did 20 years ago, like an irritated wasp stuck in a fluorescent tube. I pulled up to the side of the old diner, cut the engine, and just sat there for a moment, letting the dust settle around the truck. That alley hadn't changed. Neither had the garage door. The same patch of rust spread like a wound across the bottom corner, same dent from when I backed the F-150 into it the night we got the first engine rebuild done on time. I still remember that moment, covered in grease, 3 hours past closing, 2 beers in. She brought pizza that night. Said she was proud of me. Said we were building something. She meant it then. Or at least I thought she did. I opened the side door with the old key I'd kept hidden behind the breaker box of our current headquarters. No alarms, no cameras. Just the raw, unapologetic smell of grit, solvent, and rubber. It hit me in the face like an old friend who never changed. The rags were still in the bucket. The tools still hung in their labeled outlines along the pegboard. Even the radio, ancient AM/FM only, sat in the corner, as if waiting for me to tune it to the blues station again. The desk was where I left it, against the far wall under the photo of my first customer, a man named Benny who paid me in cash and peach cobbler. I dropped into the old chair. The leather creaked in all the familiar ways. And then I opened the bottom drawer. The envelope was still there, wrapped in a torn piece of flannel shirt, sealed in thick plastic with a single piece of black tape across the middle. Use only if war comes home. War had come. I slid it open with the utility knife I kept in my boot. Inside, 5 things. A hand-drawn diagram, my handwriting, detailing the ownership ladder of what used to be my company. A second sheet listing 7 LLCs. None had my name on them. A stapled packet of trust documents from a Vermont firm. A copy of a signed spousal waiver from 2016. And at the very bottom, a single business card. Martin Rowe, Legacy Counsel. Private Trust Structures. Martin Rowe, the ghost behind the curtain. I first met Martin after my second heart scare. She was in Colorado visiting her cousin. Didn't even come back until the 4th day I was in the hospital. That was the first time I realized something wasn't quite right. Not because she didn't show up, but because when she finally did, she kept checking my monitor like it was a countdown clock. Martin was different. Didn't advertise. No social media. No Yelp reviews. Just a referral from a client whose father had run into similar marital complications after a successful sale of his construction business. Martin specialized in legacy defense, specifically hiding value in plain sight. We spent 3 weekends together in the back office of this very garage, setting up structures, drafting irrevocable clauses, building out a lattice of ownerships so dense and obscure that even my accountant called it aggressively complex. It worked beautifully. I moved the name off the main business, converted it into a nonprofit trust operated by a holding company based in Delaware. The trust, in turn, was owned by a secondary board in Vermont. I remained the contracted founder emeritus with lifetime operational control, but zero technical ownership. From the outside, it looked like I ran it. On paper, I was a glorified consultant. She didn't know any of it. I never told her, because back then, I still hoped she wouldn't turn. That maybe we'd ride this thing out together. But just in case, I had Martin draft a silent failover protocol. If anything ever triggered marital asset division, death, divorce, even suspicion, control of the trust would instantly freeze pending board review. And now? Now she demanded half of something I hadn't legally owned for 5 years. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just swung a bat at a mirror, expecting it to crack. Instead, it was steel underneath the glass. Tempered, reinforced. I folded the documents neatly, placed them in my satchel, and locked the drawer. Then I stood up and looked around one last time. There was something poetic about the fact that the entire defense of my empire had been built here, in a garage that still leaked when it rained, surrounded by the ghosts of my early hustle. Every wrench on that wall knew more about me than the woman I shared a bed with for 17 years. I turned off the light and stepped outside. Martin picked up on the first ring. "I take it we're activating the structure?" he asked, his voice calm and dry. "War's home," I said, "and she brought cameras. Then let's bury her in paperwork." 5 years ago, I sat alone in the ER with a tightness in my chest and an EKG printout that looked like a drunk ant had danced across it. The nurse said, "It could be nothing. Could be something." And I remember thinking, if I flatline here, what happens to everything I built? She was in Scottsdale that week. Some girl's trip she booked last minute. I called twice. No answer. Texted once. She replied 8 hours later. "OMG, sorry babe. Signal is awful LOL. Hope you're okay, red heart." I wasn't. And not just physically, because around that time, something had shifted at home. Subtle at first. Quiet. But real. She started wearing makeup to work from home. Her screen would always go dark when I walked by. I'd overhear her on speaker calls, laughing just a little too long, using that fake soft voice she never used with me anymore. And one night, I saw a Google search in the browser history. "Does my husband get half if I start a company during marriage?" That's when I knew. She was planning something, or at least imagining it. And that was enough for me. So I called Martin. He flew in 2 days later. I didn't tell her. We worked out of the old shop. After hours. Under the radar. His solution was extreme, like building a bunker just because you saw clouds. But I wasn't in the mood for umbrellas. I wanted a storm shelter. We created the foundation over 90 days. Quietly. Carefully. First, we established the Ironstone Endowment, a nonprofit focused on vocational education for underprivileged youth. That was the pretty face. Behind it, we built the structure. The business, the one with the real revenue, was transferred via a series of asset sales and leasing agreements to a wholly owned subsidiary of Ironstone. That subsidiary now ran the day-to-day operations. The brand was licensed from another LLC based in Montana. All revenue funneled back into the endowment. And me? I became the founder emeritus. Technically retired. Paid under a personal services agreement. No stock. No equity. No listed title beyond advisor. In public, I still ran the show. But legally, I was a ghost. My own accountant took 2 weeks just to understand the new flowchart. He called it paranoid genius. I called it insurance. Because if she ever did what I suspected, if she ever tried to gut me on paper, I wanted her to find a shell, not a treasure chest. We even set up an automatic defense clause. Any legal attempt to claim marital assets from Ironstone would trigger a provisional lock on all trust operations and send an alert to the board's legal team in Vermont. She'd never met Martin. Never even heard his name. And that was by design. The key to surviving betrayal is not reacting when it happens. It's preparing long before it does. That night in the yard gave me the push. Her Scottsdale silence gave me the motive. And Martin gave me the structure. Of course, there were risks. It meant stepping back publicly, letting others front parts of the company. I had to hire a new COO just to give the illusion of transition. People whispered I was getting ready to sell, that I'd made enough and was planning to fade out. I let them talk. Let her think I was slowing down, weakening, becoming predictable. She even joked once, I should start a side hustle too. You'll be my sugar daddy. Then she winked and kissed my forehead like I was some old man napping on the porch. I smiled, played along, and buried the keys to the kingdom under 3 layers of nonprofit anonymity and legacy protections she'd never understand. She thought she'd married a mechanic with a good streak of luck. She didn't know I'd become something else entirely. I wasn't just hiding value. I was hiding identity. Because what she was about to sue wasn't mine anymore. It was a ghost shell. And she was about to find out how cold and empty a ghost shell can be. They started with demands. Barked through PDF attachments and condescending emails. Her lawyer's signature always bolded, always italicized, always trying to make himself look more important than the mess he'd just stepped into. They wanted ownership records, bank statements, internal audits, board notes, the entire paper trail of the business, going back at least 10 years. Their assumption was simple. I had grown the company during the marriage, so naturally, she was entitled to half. I didn't argue, didn't rush. I responded slowly, carefully, one document at a time. First, the operating agreement, dated, notarized, and signed by a holding company they didn't recognize. Then the board appointment logs. Then the licensing contracts between subsidiaries. Then the asset leaseback forms. Then the 501c3 status verification letter from the IRS, showing the Ironstone Endowment's nonprofit status as fully compliant. Each document had its own logic. Each one bled into another. Every breadcrumb led to a different rabbit hole. By the 3rd week, her lawyers started leaving voicemails instead of writing. More room to posture. Less room to be proven wrong on paper. Mr. Rowan, we are attempting to conduct a good faith discovery process here. Your delays are noted, and the court will see them for what they are. I let that one sit for a few days, then sent over a 68-page audit report from a Vermont CPA firm no one in their office had ever heard of. It summarized Ironstone's operations in legally accurate, but completely impenetrable, language. The kind of report that looks clear at a glance, but turns to fog the moment you try to follow a dollar. That's when they pushed for a deposition. They thought I'd crack under oath. Or maybe they just thought they'd finally corner me in a room, away from Martin and the board and the fortress of paperwork I'd built. So I said yes. Cheerfully. We scheduled it for a Friday morning. Neutral office. Conference room. 1 camera. 1 court reporter. She didn't show, but her lawyer did, flanked by 2 junior associates who looked like they'd rehearsed their lines all night in front of a bathroom mirror. They wore matching charcoal suits and brought 3 laptops, for pens, and one very large sense of overconfidence. I arrived 5 minutes early. Not alone. Martin walked in with me. Slim, cordial, charcoal tie, navy blazer. No briefcase, just a thin stack of papers in a leather folio, and the expression of a man who once drafted succession paperwork for a billionaire during a hostage negotiation. He introduced himself politely, sat down, didn't speak unless asked. They started slow. Timeline questions. Early business growth. First investors. I answered everything. Then they pivoted. Ownership questions. Who owns what? When did that change? Why is your name no longer attached to any direct filings with the state? Martin tilted his head, opened his folio, slid forward a set of certified documents, chain of title transfers, trustee assignments, IRS determinations. Then he spoke. In accordance with IRS regulations and the Vermont Charitable Legacy Protection Act, our client's relationship to the Ironstone Endowment is advisory only. He has no equity stake, no revocable authority, and no beneficiary designation under the operative documents. This structure was approved under IRS Private Letter Ruling 2021-23. We're happy to submit that ruling to the court, if necessary. Her lawyer froze for a moment, then asked, "So who does own the business?" Martin smiled. "No one, technically. It's a nonprofit trust, counselor. It owns itself." That was the first time the junior associate stopped typing. Then came the clawing. They tried to poke holes, suggested the structure was designed to defraud marital rights, questioned the timing, doubted the independence of the Vermont firm. Martin answered everything with an eerie calm. No emotion, no gloating, just fact after fact, clause after clause. At one point, he even offered to walk them through the tax logic behind the grantor-retained interest clause. By the third hour, her lead attorney looked like he'd been hit with a low-grade migraine. "Mr. Rowan," he finally said, pinching the bridge of his nose, "with all due respect, where's the real paper trail? The one that shows control?" I leaned back, crossed my arms, and said, "That depends. You mean legal control? Operational? Narrative?" The room went quiet, because the one thing they hadn't prepared for was the possibility that this was the real trail. Not a diversion, not a trick, just an invisible structure, built over years, buried under good paperwork and foresight. A trap they'd walked into willingly, and now they were too deep to climb back out. She made herself the hero of the narrative. In every court document, every interview she granted to the local blog crowd, now sniffing around my business like raccoons at a barbecue, she painted herself as the quiet, supportive spouse behind the scenes. Her phrasing was strategic, emotional labor, unpaid contributions, verbal encouragement that directly impacted business morale. She claimed I used marital funds to build the business, that her role as my unofficial advisor constituted years of invisible equity. Invisible, all right. Invisible because it didn't exist. What she didn't count on, what she never even remembered, was one lonely afternoon in October, 7 years ago, when she decided she wanted to be more involved. We'd just opened our third location. Business was growing fast, and she floated the idea of being listed as an advisor on the website. She said it made her feel more seen. So I let her come in for a few days. Gave her a title, Community Liaison Advisor. We printed a badge, let her host a client breakfast, even snapped a photo of her shaking hands with the mayor's assistant at a charity car wash. And then, because I'm not a fool, I had her sign something. 1 page. Nothing fancy, just a standard spousal waiver. It acknowledged that she understood she held no ownership, voting rights, or beneficiary status in any current or future company trusts or foundations. That she was acting in a volunteer advisory role for the sake of public relations only. That any contributions she made, emotional, verbal, or physical, were not to be construed as ownership in any way. She signed it with a gel pen, in pink ink, dotted the I in her name with a heart. She forgot about it the next day, but I didn't. I had Martin notarize it and file it in 2 locations. One with the trust's legal team in Vermont, and one in a separate lockbox, along with a handful of other just-in-case documents he'd told me to preserve. That 1 page sat dormant for 7 years. Until now. The day her lawyer introduced the emotional support argument in their formal filing, Martin emailed me 3 words. Use Exhibit A. It arrived in court via courier 2 days later. Stamped, sealed, notarized, legally binding. When her attorney received it, he had the audacity to laugh. "This," he said, flipping through the page like it was a grocery receipt. "You really think a document she signed 7 years ago, when she was trying to help, negates her entire marital claim?" Martin didn't blink. Yes. The judge hadn't even ruled yet, but the shift in the room was seismic. See, it wasn't just the waiver. It was the combination of things. The nonprofit trust, the invisible shell companies, the absence of direct ownership, the advisory contract with me, and now, this, a legal acknowledgement, from her own hand, that she was nothing more than a mascot with a name badge and a calendar of brunch events. Her lawyer fumbled for a counter. She signed this under duress. She hosted a ribbon cutting the same week. I said flatly, "That's not duress. That's decoration." He shifted tactics. She didn't understand what she was signing. Then why'd she request a PDF copy for her scrapbook? Martin asked, sliding a printed email across the table. Subject line, "Just in case I ever want to frame it." Face-blowing kiss. Her signature. Her email. Her emoji. He pushed the page forward gently, like a man laying down the final card in a quiet, devastating game. We didn't need to shout. We didn't need to fight. We just needed her to remember what she'd already forgotten. That sometimes, in trying to make yourself look important, you leave a paper trail with your own fingerprints. And this one? It was Exhibit A, now entered into court record. Now sitting in front of a judge who was starting to look more and more intrigued every time we pulled back another curtain. She thought she was proving how much she gave me. Instead, she just confirmed how much she never had. The morning of the hearing, she arrived in full theater. White blouse, navy pencil skirt, heels so sharp you could cut drywall with them. Her lawyer, fresh off a recent podcast about empowering women through divorce strategy, stood beside her like he'd just walked off the set of a legal drama. Teeth white, voice loud, tie aggressive. They posed on the courthouse steps, speaking in hushed tones near the local news vans, both pretending not to notice the cameras trained on them. I parked 2 blocks away, walked in wearing the same boots I'd worn the day I opened my first shop. Same watch too, black leather band, face scratch from where I once dropped it between an engine block and a hoist chain. I carried a single binder. No assistance. No theatrics. Just paper and patience. She saw me in the hallway outside the courtroom, smirked, whispered something to her lawyer, who gave me the kind of smug nod reserved for people who think they've already won. Court was scheduled for 10 a.m. At 10:06, the judge entered. Older guy, maybe mid-60s. Tired face. Reading glasses. He moved with the slow deliberateness of someone who had seen every trick in the book. He opened the case folder. Flipped once. Twice. Paused. He adjusted his glasses, then looked up at me. Then back down. Then again, eyes narrowing. "Mr. Rowan, just to clarify, this foundation structure, the Ironstone Endowment. This is your setup?" There was something off in his voice now. Less courtroom tone, more real-world curiosity. Like he was trying to piece together a puzzle from memory. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "Established 2018. Registered under federal tax-exempt status, with advisory protocols reviewed annually by an independent Vermont legal panel." He nodded, tapped his pen against the folder. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair, as if the weight of what he was realizing made the bench suddenly less comfortable. "I remember this," he muttered. "I reviewed a trust like this. God, must have been 4 or 5 years ago. Case upstate, couple divorcing over a vineyard. Her legal team tried to break it. They couldn't even get jurisdiction." Her lawyer shifted in his seat. Her expression didn't change, yet, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She hadn't expected this. Neither had her attorney. The judge flipped another page. Stopped again. "Martin Rowe," he said aloud. "That's the name on the trust filings?" "Yes, sir," I said. Now he smiled, just faintly. "I've met him. Brilliant bastard. Testified as an expert in that vineyard case. Nearly had opposing counsel in tears. Your documents were drawn up by him." I just nodded. The courtroom went silent for a moment too long. Then the judge closed the folder. "All right," he said, tapping the case file once. "Let's proceed, but I'd like to start in chambers. Both legal teams. Mr. Rowan, you too." Her lawyer blinked. "Your Honor. Is there a reason we're not proceeding in open court as scheduled?" The judge didn't look at him. Instead, he looked straight at me, with a different kind of recognition now. Not just acknowledgement. Respect. "I just want to make sure we're not wasting time chasing ghosts," he said calmly. "Especially not the kind that were built to be untouchable." She didn't smile this time. Didn't smirk. She didn't even look at me. Her hands slowly moved to her lap, folding and unfolding her fingers like she suddenly forgot where she was. The balance had shifted. Not with a bang. Not with a punch. But with a single name, on a single page, that reminded a judge of a case he lost sleep over. And now? Now he was wondering if this was déjà vu, or if he was about to preside over a rerun where the outcome was already baked into the bones of the paperwork. Her plan depended on theatrics, headlines, and public sympathy. Mine depended on a structure he already feared. The door to chambers clicked shut like a vault. The courtroom noise, whispers, shuffling papers, the muted hum of fluorescent lights, disappeared the second that latch caught. Now it was just 4 people in truth. No recorders, no transcripts, no media, just air and the weight of everything we were really here to settle. The judge didn't sit behind his desk. He stood, hand resting on the back of his chair, glasses still in one hand, the file in the other. No robe, just slacks, a white shirt, and the kind of expression a man wears when he's already seen how the movie ends, but still has to watch it all the way through. He looked directly at her lawyer first. "Before we waste the court's time," he said, "you need to understand something. I reviewed a trust almost identical to this 5 years ago. A family case out of Warren County. The wife tried to crack it. Had a legal team 3 times the size of yours. And they still couldn't break it." He dropped the file on the table. It was Rose's structure then, too. Her lawyer cleared his throat, trying not to look rattled. But I saw the shift, the hand that subtly tightened around his pen, the twitch at his jaw. "With respect, Your Honor," he began, "we believe there are substantial marital claims." The judge cut him off. "Claims don't matter if the asset isn't his. And as far as I can tell, your client's husband doesn't own a damn thing." Silence. She blinked. Twice. Then looked toward her lawyer like maybe she'd misunderstood something. She hadn't. She just didn't like what she heard. The judge continued, calmer now. "Ironstone is a nonprofit trust. It owns the operating company. The operating company leases its brand from a separate licensing firm. Your client's husband is contracted as a legacy advisor with no equity, no revocable authority, and no beneficiary designation. That's a fortress. Unless you can prove fraudulent intent or concealment of assets, this thing is ironclad." Her attorney shifted in his seat. He opened his mouth, then shut it. She finally spoke. "What does that mean?" Her voice wasn't confident anymore. It had that soft edge women use when they're trying to keep control, but the room's already spinning. The judge looked right at her. No anger, no pity. "It means," he said slowly, "you're not getting what you thought." A long pause. Then her lawyer tried again. "What about the argument of marital funds used during the formation?" The judge exhaled. "There's a waiver. There's dated filings. There's corroborating advisory roles with defined boundaries. And there's no evidence, none, that she contributed anything material during or after the transfer. If you push this to trial, all you'll do is run up billable hours." That part wasn't directed at me. It was a quiet warning to her team. "You're bleeding resources on a ghost." I watched her process it. She stared down at her lap, jaw tight, eyes unfocused. The flush in her cheeks wasn't from makeup now. It was heat, shame, maybe disbelief. Maybe the slow crawl of realization that she hadn't married a fool after all. She'd married a mechanic who read law books when she was out at yoga retreats. She looked up. Her voice came low. "He can't just walk away with everything." The judge gave a small shrug. "From what I see, he already did. 5 years ago. You just didn't notice." No rage. No gavel slam. Just that quiet finality only someone with absolute authority can deliver. She didn't argue. Didn't cry. But her fingers curled under the table, gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles went pale. And for the first time since this whole circus started, I saw it. She wasn't planning the next move. She was stalling. Because for all her planning, all her performance, and all her public posturing, she hadn't thought to ask whose name was actually on the kingdom she thought she could take. And now? Now she was standing outside a locked gate, with nothing but a broken key. She showed up after hours. The shop was closed, bay doors down, lights dimmed. I'd stayed late, not working, just sitting at my desk in the back office, sipping burnt coffee and rereading an old vendor invoice like it was some ancient scripture. It still had her signature on the bottom corner. From the days she used to help. Before the titles. Before the spa retreats and silent treatments. I heard the knock. Not loud. Just enough to say, "I'm not leaving unless you open." I didn't move at first. Let it sit. Let her think. She knocked again. When I opened the door, she looked nothing like the woman from court. The white blouse and corporate polish were gone. She wore a hoodie that used to be mine, faded gray, sleeves pulled over her fists like she was 13 again. Her eyes were swollen, face streaked with runny makeup she hadn't bothered to fix. I didn't say a word, just stepped aside. She came in slow, like the place itself scared her. It probably did, because she wasn't walking into a shop. She was walking into a mausoleum, of a version of us she thought she'd outgrow, outrun, outsmart. "I didn't come to fight," she said quietly. I didn't answer. She wandered past the tire rack, her hand grazing the old vending machine by the break room, the one that still took quarters and jammed every third Snickers. I drove by here last week, she said. Saw the lights were still on. I guess I thought. She trailed off. I waited. I was stupid, she finally said, voice trembling. Not about everything, just, I thought I had more time, more leverage. Still, I said nothing. She turned toward me now, face red, wet, raw. We don't have to finish this in court. We can pull back. Just give me something. Something that says I mattered. That I wasn't just a phase you survived. There it was. The hook. Not financial. Not legal. Emotional. She wasn't here for money. Not anymore. That ship was buried beneath legal bedrock. She was here to claw at the past. To rewrite the narrative in her own head before the judge's ruling sealed it in ink. She wanted a scrap of legacy. A memento. A final you mattered from the man she had spent the last year trying to erase. I nodded once. Walked past her. Into the back office. The walls were still covered in old photos, ribbon cuttings, charity car washes, late-night engine builds. And one photo in particular, her and me. Day one. Me in grease-stained coveralls. Her in cut-off jeans, laughing, holding a sign that said grand opening, $10 oil change plus free cookie. I took it down, brought it back out. This is yours, I said, handing it to her. The rest, you burned. She took it in both hands, looked at it like it might burst into flame. Her lip quivered. Her knees nearly buckled. But I didn't offer a chair. Or a hug. This wasn't us anymore. It was a ghost town she'd come back to visit. Goodbye, Elise, I said. Not honey. Not babe. Not even hey. Just her name. She left without another word. I locked the door behind her and sat back down. Because what she wanted that night wasn't reconciliation. It was erasure. A soft, poetic rewrite of the years she'd steamrolled with ambition and ego. She wanted me to cry. To say, yes, you mattered. Yes, I still miss you. But if she wanted a monument, she should have built one before she started swinging wrecking balls. All I had left for her was a frame, a photo, and the silence she used to mistake for weakness. Now, it was closure. Court reconvened 3 days later. The press had moved on. No more cameras on the steps. No more whispers in the hall. The spectacle had fizzled, replaced by the quiet grind of legal formalities, motions, statements, procedural throat clearing. But there was still tension in the air, not just between us, in the walls, the floors. Even the court reporter sat with her fingers slightly stiff, like she didn't know whether she was about to transcribe a standard ruling or history. She sat 2 rows in front of me, flanked by her attorney and a younger associate with 2 laptops and no clue what was about to happen. She wore black again, the kind of power outfit people choose when they think image might still tip the scale. Her posture was flawless, chin lifted, but her eyes? They were flicking toward the judge's bench too often, like she knew a verdict was coming, and didn't like the shape of it. The judge entered precisely at 10 o'clock. No robe today. He wore a tailored gray suit, thin pinstripes, sleeves rolled slightly past the wrist, as if he planned to do more reading than ruling. He placed the file down in front of him and opened it slowly, page by page, section by section. Then he stopped, dead in the middle of the trust's structural language. He read something twice, then a third time, then looked up, directly at me. Mr. Rowan, he said, quiet and pointed. Just to confirm, you're the Michael Rowan? From the original Ironstone model. You could hear a pin drop. Even the old wall clock behind the bench seemed to hesitate. I nodded once. Yes, Your Honor. He leaned back slowly. The tension in the room contracted like a lung holding breath. Even her lawyer, full of big talk and network quotes just days earlier, flinched slightly at the recognition. The judge ran a hand down his jawline, eyes narrowing, lips pressing into a straight line. Well, he muttered, almost to himself, that changes things. He folded the file shut, tapped it twice with the edge of his pen, then addressed the room, calm but firm. I'm familiar with this model. I studied it when it was presented at the 2019 Legacy Trust Symposium. It's been cited in 4 appellate decisions. None were able to pierce it. Not one. And now I'm looking at the architect of that very structure, sitting in my courtroom. He glanced at her attorney. Counselor, unless you have something seismic you've withheld, I see no legal standing that would justify continuing this. The attorney sputtered, voice catching somewhere between shock and desperation. Your Honor, with all due respect, there are still open questions of intent, of. The judge held up a hand. You're not going to argue intent to a man who built a system designed to remove it from litigation. He turned back to me. Mr. Rowan, I believe you've honored every standard of good faith and fiduciary separation this court could ask for." He looked at her now, not with cruelty, not with sympathy, just quiet finality. "This proceeding is concluded." The gavel didn't even fall. He didn't need it. It was over, not with a ruling, but with a recognition. Not just of my name, but of the work behind it. The planning, the foresight, the knowledge that when war comes home, defense doesn't start in court. It starts years before, in quiet rooms with ink and steel in your spine. She sat frozen. No tears, no screams. Just that awful stillness of someone realizing too late that they underestimated the man who used to pump gas with bare hands and come home smelling like diesel and sweat. Because that man had just ended her game without lifting his voice. Outside the courthouse, she slipped the mask back on like it had never cracked. Straight shoulders, clean lines, that PR smile barely touched by stress. Her lawyer hovered nearby, answering questions with vague legalese. Ongoing matters, respect for the court's process, no comment on sealed exhibits. But she couldn't help herself. When the local business reporter asked if the ruling had shocked her, she let out a practiced laugh and said, "Oh, it was all just a misunderstanding. Things got complicated. It's being resolved privately." Privately. She said it like she still had a seat at the table. Like the judge hadn't already closed the file and walked out. Like the trust didn't already have protocols in place to erase her completely from every operational memory. Privately. As if anything about this was hers to spin anymore. I didn't stay. Didn't wave. Didn't correct the story. Didn't offer a quote to the press. I walked straight through the lobby, past the cameras, down the courthouse steps, and to my truck. The same one I'd driven to my first day of work at the garage. Still ran like hell. Still had the patched vinyl seat she used to laugh at. I turned the key and let it take me back. The diner next to the original garage was still there. New paint, new sign, same smell of burned bacon and cheap coffee. I parked behind it, just like I used to when the business was nothing more than a dream with 4 tires and a jack lift. The bay door was already up. Inside, Martin stood near the back wall, hands folded behind his back, reading a sheet of final revisions we discussed weeks ago, before all this ever made it to a courtroom. He turned when I walked in. Nodded once. No handshake. No congratulations. That wasn't our style. I stepped past the racks of tools, the old lift that still groaned when you raised it, and toward the far wall. It was different now. Painted fresh. Framed in walnut trim. At the center hung a single bronze plaque, mounted clean and centered. Built from dirt. Shielded by stone. I stared at it for a moment. Not because I needed to admire it. Because I needed to remember it. The empire wasn't mine anymore. Not in the way she had imagined. Not in a way anyone could burn down with a blog post or break apart with a lawyer's pen. It wasn't built on declarations or tax returns or fragile marriage vows. It was built in nights like this. In silence. In planning. In the sweat that didn't ask to be noticed and the foresight that didn't care to be thanked. She wanted half. She got a headline. She wanted revenge. She got a lesson. She thought this was about money. It never was. It was about what survives. And now, she gets to tell whatever story she needs to save face. But me? I have the real one. And it's carved into steel. Hanging on a wall. In the garage where everything started.